Chapter 23. I'll be there in 10 minutes. She sat on a bench hidden behind a large green hedge, protected by a black iron gate. In 5 minutes, she would open the gate and follow the path to the front and wait for Brandon. She had time to look up and around the side of the mansion and saw cameras extending on the side, covering the garden and front and behind the building. The club would get busy about 11 o'clock. Now was a good time to get away. As much as she thought she belonged in this setting, somehow she didn't feel comfortable. Looking at her phone for the first time since she had been in the club, and for a message she knew would come from Ross, she reluctantly turned it on, and sure enough several posts popped up. It was 8 minutes since she spoke to Brandon, and she would make her way to the front of the mansion. As she walked around, she passed a couple on the sidewalk, busy chatting and heading in the opposite direction. Alex kept her head down because she didn't want to look at anyone or cause any unnecessary attention to herself. Maybe next time I'll wear a different disguise. I'll go as a blonde. Keep everyone guessing. Especially that handsome man, she thought. She didn't know why the thought of her going as a blonde crossed her mind like everything lately that appeared so foreign to her, but for some reason it amused her. Slipping past the couple, she glanced over and spotted Brandon, but as she headed for the cab, hand on the door, she heard a woman say, "Isn't that Alex?" "No. You're seeing things, Melody. Concentrate on me." Melody stopped and watched at Alex with a curious glance. Jonas took her face and turned it to him. "I'm going to introduce you to a life you won't want to walk away from." But Melody pulled away from Jonas and followed the woman to the sidewalk. She watched her get into the cab. Melody stopped at the curb, her mouth wide open. She stood glaring at the woman, her brow furrowed in confusion, as the cab drove away. Jonas caught up with her standing at the curb. "Come on, Melody. Don't make me wait. I have something important to teach you tonight." Melody, still with an open mouth and confused mind, turned to Jonas. And he said to her, "I'm putting on the dog collar tonight. Don't you want that?" "Tonight I'm the submissive," Jonas said in a playful, light voice. "Every night you're the submissive. Just the way I like your handsome ass. Down on all fours and begging me for a smell," Melody said, her voice a whisper with a wide grin. She still couldn't take her eyes off the street as yellow cab after yellow cab streaked by. Jonas held her tight around the shoulders. She was his kind of woman. But what about Crystal and his baby? He appeared to forget everything, not because he wanted to forget them, but because his long-term memory tended to come and go sometimes, and this time it appeared to be gone, and his short-term memory was all that was working now. Unlike his brother Max, he had an excuse, but what would be Max's excuse? Could he wake up and realize he hadn't done all he could to find Alex? Maybe he should have gone to the police, but now it was too late. Jonas gazed into Melody's eyes and said, "My kind of woman," he said, taking her hand in his. And they strolled off together, and Melody occasionally looking behind her, questioning what she thought she had seen. When Jonas closed the door to his room behind him, Brandon drove his cab with Alex inside, heading for the Long Island Expressway. Brandon said to Alex as he steered the cab into traffic, "I know this is none of my business, but what was that about? Does that woman know you?" "I don't think so. I just started visiting this club a few days ago. She thought I was someone by the name of Alex." "That's Blackstone's wife," Brandon said, then hitting his brakes hard before running into the back of a car. Looking into his rear-view mirror. "Frankly, I don't see it." Brandon was looking at the short black wig and red lipstick. He could only see what he wanted to see. Or maybe he had been staring too long at the streetlights or cab lights, or a book to notice anything else. You know, Maximilian Blackstone calls his wife Alex. That rich industrialist I told you about, Brandon said, not taking his eyes off the traffic or watching in the mirror at her anymore. Please don't say anything, but I was with him tonight. No way. He's too wrapped up in his wife too. She finished his words, to be with a woman like me. It's not that. I know Alex. I know Mrs. Blackstone. And I know what I've read about Mr. Blackstone, but you can't believe everything you read in the papers. But I do know that his brother is all fucked up, and I can believe he is also, but… Brandon, whether you believe me or not, I was with Blackstone. And I don't think it was the first time I've been with him. What do you mean? Brandon looked in the rearview mirror. It's something about him that makes me know I've had an intimate relationship with him. I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but are you on drugs? Brandon said not to be funny, but he was dead serious when he asked the question. I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but do you have any? Alex said. Brandon came to a full stop. Just kidding. I'm not on drugs, but it's weird. All of this is just fucking weird, Alex said. Maybe it wasn't Blackstone, but his fucked up brother in that room with you. He used to own that club. They are twins, you know. I didn't know he had a twin. But I wouldn't know anyway. I have problems with my memory. I have amnesia. I can't remember a thing. Amnesia. Did you fall and damaged your brain? I don't know. I don't have any memory of that. I can't remember past last week. I have to rely on my husband to tell me everything. That's a bummer. I thought I had problems. Your husband could tell you anything, and you wouldn't know the difference. He could tell you he was married to you, and you wouldn't know. Have you tried checking on him or these things he's telling you? No. I haven't. He hardly tells me anything. Brandon said just enough to Alex for her to doubt Ross. The ride was 2 hours to Long Island, and another 15 minutes to her home, where Ross was waiting patiently to drill her about where she had been for the last 10 hours. She read the message Ross had sent earlier. I'm calling the police if you don't come home tonight. She didn't respond to that message. She didn't expect, and she expect Ross would go to bed either. When Brandon's cab stopped at her door at the Long Island mansion, Alex paid him and stepped out. When Brandon returned to Manhattan, Max was waking up from his sleep at the club. Max fumbled around until he found the remote for the lights. He knew he was alone before he turned them on. He raised his arms expecting to pull her over to him, and she wasn't there. She had taken her warmth with her because the room felt empty and cold. He had been the one to leave the bed early in the morning when Alex was asleep and fly out to another continent before she awakened. Now it was his turn to feel the emptiness of not having someone there when he woke from his sleep. Especially if he had enjoyed the presence of the person and looked forward to waking up with her in his arms. Waking up a few hours early expecting to feel Kelly's warm body next to his, talk to her, have breakfast before he left her to look for his wife, didn't happen as he had planned, and it wasn't to be. She had disappeared, and he didn't know who she was or where she went to. He called his driver to bring him a change of clothing. Then he showered and ordered breakfast, thinking it was about 9 in the morning. For some reason he felt great, and now he wanted to eat. If he had been a man who smoked, he would light up a cigarette. His night was that terrific, considering he still didn't know where Alex was, and the woman who had given him the most excitement in a long time had walked out on him in the middle of the night. Taking more time in the shower to give Dominic a chance to bring his suit to him, he heard a knock at the door, and his breakfast was delivered. The same waiter who had serviced him before was standing with a large tray of orange juice, fruit, yogurt, and a large plate filled with eggs and a steak. The waiter noticed that the seal on the liquor bottle hadn't been broken. Max directed him where to place the food. As Max signed the bill, he asked, "Do you know Mr. Jonas Blackstone?" "Of course, sir. He was the one who originally hired me. Great man to work for." Max interrupted, "No business sense but a warm heart." "I know." The waiter smiled and said, "Yes, Mr. Blackstone." "Do you know if he's in?" "I think so. He was having a party in his room." And the waiter said, "Anything else, sir?" "No. Thank you." Max sat down to eat his food, and then he would see Jonas. Max was used to eating at any hour. He never kept up with time. That was for someone else to do. When he ate the last part of the steak, he wiped his mouth and answered the door. It was Dominic, standing with a suit bag that contained a dark blue suit and white shirt. "Mr. Blackstone, your secretary said that you had a call from Mr. Sebastian Hunter. He said that he needed to see you soon. He has information that you would find important." "Thank you, Dominic. What time is it?" The curtains were closed, and Max couldn't see outside. Dominic looked at his watch. "It's 4 a.m., sir." "Have my secretary call Mr. Hunter and tell him that I'll meet him in his office at 6 a.m. "Anything else?" "Wait for me. This shouldn't take long. I have to see Jonas." Dominic nodded and closed the door behind him and waited in the lounge. The club had settled down, but like all parties, there were people who didn't want to stop the partying, because they didn't want to bring an end to pleasure. There were a few stragglers milling around and watching at the glass wall at some of the recreations of the female dominants and the submissive men. Rossini took special care to provide open rooms where those who wanted to join could get a taste of what goes on, and to prevent freakouts, where someone could get hurt. It appears that the customers were more than satisfied because Rossini was making more money than he could imagine, and soon Jonas would be paid off, and out of his balding hair. Rossini thought about buying a toupee. Because of his dealings with Maximilian, he noticed he had lost most of his hair since becoming involved with the Blackstones. And now he banked on the customer with money to burn, Maximilian Blackstone, who would quicken that process. When Max walked over to Jonas's small guest house, Jonas was sound asleep. His medication had calmed him and prevented him from walking around at night. But Max didn't know how long it would be before he refused to take the pills, or where he would find him next. Hopefully not dead, he thought. He knocked on the door, and there wasn't any answer. He knocked again, and then he tried the doorknob, and the door was unlocked, and so Max walked in. He stood looking down at Jonas. He was sleeping, curled up in a fetal position, and a girl was holding him around his waist. She too was sleeping. Around his neck was a black and red slave collar. He had been up to his old games. And as Max took a second look around the room, there were signs of kinky play. Whips and chains and handcuffs on the floor near the bed. He put his hand to his mouth and coughed. He coughed louder. Jonas stirred, but the girl didn't. She lay there hugging on him, and they were both nude. Max coughed louder, and Jonas opened his eyes. He wiped them and looked up at Max standing in front of him in his dark blue suit with a white shirt. The dim light caught his sparkling cufflinks, and the glare coming from them woke Jonas up completely. Max, what are you doing here? Did you call Crystal? Jonas scratched his head trying to remember the last time he talked to Crystal, and just who was Crystal. Then after a minute of searching his brain, he said, "Yeah. Is something wrong?" He sprang up and out of the girl's arms, which caused her to open her eyes. Seeing the man in the beautiful suit standing over her, she made an indelicate reach and pulled the cover up to her waist, leaving her breasts bare. "Max. This is my friend Melody." "Melody, Max." "I think we've met," Max said. "Oh yes. I forgot," Jonas said, raking his hand through his hair. "You're Maximilian Blackstone, married to my friend Alex. If you don't mind me saying this, I think that suit looks awesome on you. In other words, you are fucking hot in that suit." Max closed his eyes quick and then opened them. His mouth took a hard line. "Can we talk alone, Jonas?" Max said, his face showing his displeasure. "Mr. Blackstone, you were asking me before about your wife." "I think I saw her tonight," Melody said as Max turned from the door and turned around to face her. "Are you sure?" "No. She's not sure. The woman didn't look anything like Alex," Jonas said. "This girl had short black hair." Max turned his head to the door, stunned. He took a few steps, as if he would run out of the room. Then he stepped back and then turned to face Jonas. "No. Can't be," he thought. Was this one of her games? Max remembered when he first met Alex, she liked to play games with him. But why and how could she do such a thing? It was beyond cruel to make him think that she had deserted him and the children, or been kidnapped. He could understand her doing this to him, but not the children. He shook his head and passed his hand under his shaven chin. Nothing made sense to him. He hadn't received a note notifying him of her kidnapping. But had she planned this to test his devotion to her? Well, he just fucked up and failed that test, and he would have hell to pay now that he proved that he couldn't be trusted. Even if it had been her all along, she would make him pay dearly. Max would pay any price she asked if she wouldn't leave him. Just let it be her, he thought. Jonas had pulled up his jeans and threw on an open shirt. He walked out the door with Max. Max looked down. Jonas didn't have any shoes on. "Do you think it was Alex?" Max asked. "I know Alex when I see her, and I say it wasn't her. Why would she come here?" "Because I'm here," Max said, his voice falling. "Maybe she thought I was in New York all along, and I was here when I should have been with her. She thought I would be here. And I am here." "Oh. Yeah," Jonas said. "Why are you here?" Max looked at him and dropped his eyes. He wouldn't say anything more on that subject, but he did say, "Go back to San Francisco now. I'll get the rest of the money from Rossini and put it into your account. Crystal and your baby will need it if you continue with this. Promise me you will go home. Melody will understand." Jonas stared at Max. "Trust me, she will." "I'll miss her," Jonas said as if his dog just died. "You just met her. You'll get over her." "Maybe you're right," Jonas said, turning back and opening the door with Melody, patiently waiting for another lesson in bondage. This time she had begged Jonas to spank her, and he looked forward to placing her young ass across a bench and spanking it until it was red and she yelled out her safe word. And that would be the culmination of his quick S&M lessons. If he were to leave soon, there wouldn't be any more lessons, but he had so little time and so much he wanted to teach her, he thought, as he watched down at her beautiful full ass waiting for the spanking of her life. Chapter 24. As Max's limo pulled up to Sebastian's office, he looked up and saw a light. It was exactly 6 a.m. Good. He's a man that understands that time is important, and that Max paid him well for the little information he had received. But Sebastian was able to get information that Max never could have gotten. And he knew how to keep his mouth shut. Sebastian had many flaws, and it had to do with woman, but he was honest and knew how to get evidence for his clients. Max was met at the bottom of the stairs by Sebastian. They shook hands and didn't trade any pleasantries because of the time of the morning. Sebastian would rather be in bed with his woman than offering Max a stale cup of coffee. They trekked up the cold marbled stairs, and Sebastian opened the door and stood to the side until Max had entered. "I know this isn't your usual hours, but I couldn't sleep," Max said. "I understand, Mr. Blackstone, and neither could I." He turned and looked at the coffee pot that had day-old coffee and sat on a burner. He had just turned it on minutes before Max arrived. "Would you like a cup?" Watching at the coffee pot, Max smelled it. It smelled as if it had been burnt the day before, and the smell didn't improve as each day passed. "No thank you. I don't take my coffee this early." Looking at Sebastian searching for a clean cup to pour his coffee from a coffee maker that had been around since Max was a child, he said to him, "What is it you have for me?" "Sit please," Sebastian said, waving him over to an uncomfortable wooden chair near a desk. Max sat as Sebastian poured himself a cup of the black coffee and took a sip. "My fiancée wants me to buy her one of those new coffee makers. The kind where you put in a pod. She says it saves time and money." Max looked at Sebastian as if he was talking a foreign language. He kept nodding his head as if he was listening, but his thoughts were on Kelly, or maybe it was Alex. He hoped Sebastian would get on with it, because if he didn't have answers, he would have to bring in more people. Someone from outside of New York. Max was a patient man, but he didn't like talk just for talk. And talking about a coffee maker was driving him up the wall. "Please, Mr. Hunter. You said you had something on my wife's whereabouts." "Yes, that's true." He sat at the desk. "Mr. Blackstone, do you think your wife would go off with another man?" Max's eyes glared and his forehead furrowed. Sebastian moderated his tone. "I know I asked you that before. I have clear evidence that she's with a man named Ross Montgomery." "Who did you say?" "Ross Montgomery. His brother Robert worked for me." Max steepled his hands across his mouth. "Yes, I know. But he was killed," Sebastian said. "The coroner said it was an accident. He had been known to frequent bondage clubs where he practiced erotic asphyxiation," Max said. "I know I was on the case when I was fired. But then that's another story. I have people on the streets that said that Ross came into an inheritance, and now he has this mansion on Long Island, and he's leaving the country soon with his wife. From my sources, he doesn't have a wife, and the picture I've been passing around, the wife looks just like your wife." He dropped the picture out of the folder which Max had given him. "Could your sources be wrong?" "The only way to find out is to go out there before they leave for Europe. He's having a party tomorrow night, and they are due to leave within the week. And guess what?" He tapped an envelope twice and dropped the invitations on the desk. "I told you I'm resourceful." "It appears so, Mr. Hunter," Max said. "Is there anything else I should know?" "Only that he's an actor." Max never thought Alex would leave him and her children. Not for an actor, and not for money. She had all the money she would ever want. He began to doubt himself. His eyes searched around the room. Did she love this man enough to leave him and their children, he wondered? If she did, then he had no avenue to win her back. He was an unemployed actor until he inherited his brother's money, Sebastian said. Max stood and murmured, "This doesn't make sense." He didn't know what to make of this information. It was all too baffling. There had to be more to this. Max had doubts and hoped that Sebastian was wrong. But then it would be worse if something terrible had happened to her. Both scenarios were world-shattering. Max lumbered to the door. He turned. "I'll have my driver pick you up at." He glanced down at the invitation in his hand, seeing but not seeing it. "At 9. Do you want him to pick you up here, or at your apartment?" His voice vague and hollow. He sounded as if someone else were saying his words. "My office would be more convenient. I'll tell my fiancé I'm on a case." Max twisted his mouth and opened the door and stepped down the stairs one at a time. It was 10 a.m. when Max returned to the bondage club to speak to Rossini. It was a Friday and the club full with customers. Max walked in with Dominic standing at the door. "I need information on Kelly, and don't tell me that you still haven't done a background check on her." "The only thing I was able to dig up was that she lives somewhere in Long Island with this character name of Ross." "Ross Montgomery?" "Yes. As a matter of fact, I purchased his holdings from him when his brother died. I never knew he had a woman. Robert said his brother was some kind of actor that went on the road a lot and didn't have time for women. His career was his woman. Wanted to be a star one day. Now he has loads of money and a beautiful woman, but I guess he couldn't buy his way into Broadway." Rossini swiveled around in his chair and glanced at Max with a secret gleam in his eyes. "That same kinky woman you fucked?" Rossini looked up into Max's face, and his eyes were like stone. A dangerous cold look crept into his marbled eyes. And Rossini changed his words and tone. "The same pretty woman you appear to be stuck on," Rossini said, hiding a teasing nervous laugh. Max watched at Rossini without saying a word. "Jonas is leaving, and you will have to deal with my lawyers. They will send you the papers for you to sign. Minus what you have paid him. If you have any problems getting up the money, then let me know right away. I will have to send Dominic to look at your books." Rossini sat uncomfortable in a comfortable chair. He shifted from side to side as Max gave him his orders. "I don't think it will take long for you to get Jonas's money together," Max said, his steeple hands joined together just below his chin. "Business looks good." Max stood and Rossini relaxed. He hated the meetings with Max. Max was one man he couldn't read. Not because he was incapable, but because he had never met a man like him before. "We're doing all right. Especially since you've been a regular customer," Rossini said with a wide smile. Max raised an eyebrow and bit his lip. "I don't think I'll be coming around much longer." Rossini didn't expect to hear that. He had depended on Max being a man addicted to this particular lifestyle. He depended on that addiction to fuel and energize his club for years to come, and now Max pulled the rug from under him in that few minutes. He bet on an unknown horse and he lost. And because of this, he knew why he was afraid of Maximilian Blackstone. He never knew what this man was capable of doing. Because of that, he would pay anything just to get him out of his life.